What keeps you motivated through running a business?
I think for me, I love the team we've assembled, like working with the team every day to service our clients and developing them, helping a lot of these guys become better at the craft of what is paid media. And not just the hard skills side, but the soft skills side of the business too. That's what kind of motivates me, is the mission we're on is to develop a good team, but also work with great companies and help them achieve success. And through all of that, I mean, that's just a statement, but it's all the work that goes into doing it that keeps me motivated because I like it.
Welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast. If you're looking for real conversations with real people, you're the right place. Let's go!
Live. Awesome. Borja Cuan, welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast, brother. It's a blessing to have you on. How are you doing today?
Thank you, gentlemen. Doing great. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Good to have you with us, bro.
Definitely. Now, Borja, you've been in the game since 1998, right?
Yes, long time.
That's quite a while. And looking good, might I add.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's how you start a podcast right there. Compliment their looks.
It doesn't come without effort. I don't just, naturally look this good. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
And see, to give the listeners a little insight, is that's a year after I graduated high school. And I very rarely meet people that's been in the game, as long as me and still, aren't full of grays and look like they're 100 years old. So congrats, bro.
Nothing wrong with gray, man. Absolutely nothing.
If you look closely, you will find some gray hair in this beard of mine that I've been growing for a couple of days. So there is some gray there. You just have
Own
to
it, man. Embrace it. There's wisdom in the gray.
Exactly. Translates into experience, doesn't it?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, I have a few hidden. You got to get light. You got to zoom in a lot.
Experience, stress, maybe a little combination of both.
Exactly.
Stress. What?
Not a bad thing. Stress is not a bad thing. That's my motto.
The good side of stress, the upside of stress, right? Anybody that's read that book, man, that will get you going. Whole different perception on stress. It was a game changer for me. Anyway,
let's revisit that topic at some point during this conversation. I think it's as we're joking about it a little bit, but actually it's a very true thing, right? Embracing stress, accepting it as inevitable and part of life.
I don't think we have to revisit it. I mean, let's start right there. I mean, expound a little further on that.
Yeah. So I think, as a business owner, something that I face often, and many business owners face the same thing, is working with a team, building a team, growing a team, and working through challenges with that team. And oftentimes a big friction point for folks that we work with, we're in professional services, so it's a demanding business. Clients have expectations, sometimes realistic, sometimes unrealistic, but the bottom line is we have to deliver performance for our clients. And with that comes a lot of work that goes into delivering the service, which can lead to a lot of stress if you're an employee and you're on the front lines and you have a lot of client demand.
Mm-hmm.
The expectations are great. And so I often, coach the team or work with the team on advising them how to manage through difficult times, right? Stressful times. And I think one of the things that I really talk about that is really simple is don't reject stress. Like when you get stressed, don't reject it. Don't think of it as a bad thing necessarily. Embrace it and understand that it's part of life, right? So as we mature, as we get older, we have more responsibility, whether that's professionally or personally through marriage, having children, acquiring a home that leads to financial stress, having kids, more responsibility as you ascend in your professional career. You also have more responsibility, right? Now you might be managing teams, you might be managing revenue, you might have goals, whatever it is. We all just have stress, and that will be forever part of our life. So, what I always try to tell people, number one, is don't reject it, embrace it as normal. But most importantly, how do we prepare ourselves for what is inevitably going to be a stressful situation, right? We know stress will come into our lives. And what I try to say is what I do as a human being, as a leader, as a co-founder, as a business owner, is prepare myself mentally and physically for that future stress, right? And so, because you think of life is tough. You get beat up in life, right? There's always something, right? And so I know that that's going to happen. So I'm trying to invest in myself mentally, physically, emotionally, so that when I have a stressful situation, it's very easy to deal with, right? And so with the team, it's a lot of that kind of conversation. It's, hey, let's talk about what's going on. And frankly, a lot of the times I have found that the stress that they talk about doesn't truly exist. It's self-created. And that's not to say that I'm diminishing what they're telling me, but I'm trying to sort of diagnose the issue. And oftentimes we come to the agreement that this stress isn't really there, that their mind has created it, unfortunately and unnecessarily, but it is a true statement. Like, oh, you thought that you had to get this done, but who told you that? Well, nobody did. Well, then why did you think you had to do this by this date? So a lot of times it's, sort of not creating stress unnecessarily and really reserving it for when it is truly a stressful situation and you have a deadline and you have a big meeting and all of these things. And then it's also just preparing yourself for that. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by way of taking care of yourself, frankly. Like a lot of what I talk about is making sure you're doing all the things you need to do when you're not working to invest in yourself, so that mentally you're prepared and physically you're prepared to endure the stress. So that includes things like, and this is going off a business topic, but it's really correlated, which is investing in yourself by way of making sure you're getting enough sleep at night, making
Absolutely.
sure you're exercising, right? This isn't about getting a six pack or having big biceps. This is just walking, running, whatever it is you do to get out and about, so that you can recharge and reset. Do that, right? It's eating the right foods. It's recovering. It's doing what you need to do to kind of recharge, whether that's social connections, whether that's gaming, whether that's watching Netflix, I don't know, but do all of those things so that you're kind of ready for sort of the war of life.
100%. I like what you said there. You got to embrace it. So often we try to avoid it and say, I'm gonna live this stress-free life and just I'm gonna not have any stress, and it's just impossible. I heard it said one time that we're either in a trial, coming out of a trial, or going into a trial, and that is our life on repeat. We're in the middle of something, we're coming out of something, or we're about to go into something else. And trials, they bring stress. But stress is not necessarily a bad thing. The thing goes into exercise. When we go physically exercise, that's putting stress on the body. But, if you equate it as negative, you're going to say, well, I'm not going to work out because it's stress. And so our body knows what to do with that stress. But I think so often we have these self-imposed stresses that are things that we don't need. And they're the ones that we put on, and these expectations that maybe we put on ourselves that are really unattainable. And we can go grind away for a bit and knock these things out. But at the end of the day, we're going to get burnt out by those things. And so I think, it's all about managing stress and managing it appropriately. And everything you just said, like how we take care of our body physically, there's a direct correlation with those aspects into running a business, managing a business, or being productive with whatever we're working on.
Yeah. And let's talk about the exposure to stress, right? It's like you've got to expose yourself to certain degrees of stress, or when the time comes where you got to, do your thing, whatever it is. Jay Hill's got a speaking engagement coming up, or our first podcast, or let's relate it to podcasts. Someone's first podcast could be very stressful. It could be very anxiety ridden, right? And they could just be full of butterflies but if they put in the reps, they break through the barriers, right? That stress then turns into, it becomes second nature, right? But then they got the next thing that stresses them out, right? Like, well, what do I do after this? It's always a stressful situation. You got the SEALs. They expose themselves 24/7 to stress just so they can handle high stress situations. It's like that's why it's something as simple as if you go to a range, right? Well, you're in Cali. This might be, I don't know how it plays out.
They
but
have ranges. It's just a little harder.
Yes.
In Cali.
So if you did need to actually utilize a firearm to protect your family, and it's a high stressful situation, then you know how to function in that situation, right? It's the same thing in business and all across business. Y'all both said it. You're going to run into client disputes, people that you're working with are going to have disagreements. They're going to be stressful about stuff. You're going to be stressed about stuff. You've got to learn how to navigate that and expose yourself to it, because I think people live this fantasy like it's stress-free. You both hit the nail on the head. It's you're either going in a trial, out of a trial, or something in a trial. Jay Hill, you said it. That was freaking awesome. You're essentially always in a trial, right? So I think that exposure and leaning into it, me, myself, whenever I've hit stressful situations, I've kind of looked at it as opportunities. It's like a mindset shift, right? It's like, wow, this is giving me a whole lot of anxiety, but can I break through this barrier, right? So next time I can handle it with a little more ease, and it might be less stressful, right? With a little more grace. And I love it, because as business owners, entrepreneurs, if you're building a brand, no matter what size you are, you all face that. You all hit those barriers constantly, right?
Yep.
So speaking of stress, so let's go back 27 years. You, Borja, you've been a digital marketer for 27 years. And if you go back to like the late 90s, that's when the internet's really getting started. I remember being in college, and I had a computer, but it was more like a paperweight on my desk, as opposed to getting on and doing things. So, talk about like when you were getting started in the late 90s with digital marketing, what that was like.
Yeah, it was new to me when I graduated from college, and I interviewed at internet startup. I was working with a recruiter back in 1998, and they reached out to me and they said, "Hey, we have this position we think you might be a good fit for at this internet startup based in Boston, Massachusetts." And that's where I grew up. That's where I went to college. And she gave me a little bit of background story on the founders of that company, two brothers, Harvard grads. One of them had sold already his first company. So, successful exit, and he was starting a second venture. And I was like, great, sounds like, and I didn't have 10 options. It was kind of my only option. And I said, great, when do I need to show up? So I interviewed at this company, and I remember I didn't interview well. In fact, I didn't get the job I applied for. I was underqualified. And I felt leaving that interview that I didn't do very well, because the first interview I had was with my hiring manager, and he had asked me a very simple question that I answered incorrectly, or I didn't even really have an answer to it. But this gives you an idea of how early on this was in terms of the internet. But he was like, "What's your preferred browser?" And I was like, I don't really have a browser like preference. Like, I don't know. This is back in 1998.
Man.
So we're talking, a long time ago. So I basically wasn't as technical in his eyes as he needed for this role. So I didn't get that job, but I ended up getting a call that night from the recruiter saying, "Hey, they're not going to move forward with you for this position as an account manager, but they have a lesser or more junior position that they think you might be a good fit for if you want to come and interview for that." And I said, absolutely. I had no ego. I was just happy to get another shot to get into this company. And long story short, I ended up getting that job as an account representative, which was the most entry level position at that company, and ended up staying there for 8 years through an immense amount of change. We were private. I was number 29 when I joined that company, employee number 29. And then when I left 8 years later, I think they had 9,000 employees worldwide. So it was a much larger company, obviously, but it was, an immensely fulfilling and rewarding experience for me professionally. Met a lot of great people. I learned a lot about the internet and performance marketing, and, got a lot of opportunity within that company to move up the ranks. So when I left, I was, in a sales position for that company, and was their number one sales producer, and just had a great time there. So yeah, learned a lot. And a big part of that learning, frankly, I attribute to being surrounded by really smart people that were willing to sort of teach. And I ended up befriending and becoming close with some folks that became my mentors. And it was because I reached out and was always very curious and wanted their help and guidance, that they took me in under their wings and kind of taught me a lot about business. And I would make it a point to say, hey, can we grab lunch? Can we grab coffee? Even though these were people that were, in some cases, I'd say 20 years senior, if not more than I was. I was a very young kid at the time, but I always had an old soul, and I always gravitated towards older people. And I really would observe these people, and I said, man, they're very successful. I can just tell they're successful the way they are, and I was always curious about learning how they achieve that success. And it was through those interactions, it was through those observations that I learned a lot. And so, yeah, that was my kind of
Yeah.
introduction to the internet.
Now, how old were you at the time? Or just
I-
for context?
Yeah, I was 21.
21.
Yeah.
So I ask this often to people, like, it sounds like you had a lot of kind of entrepreneurial mindset already at an early age, and just this business savviness. A lot of people don't understand the power of like proximity, the power of seeing those people, taking the initiative, going out and listening to them, to kind of the apprenticeship type approach. So my question for you is, like, compared to college, what did you go to college for? And, did college education actually set you up for success in business, or was it more that apprenticeship kind of sitting under the wings of those people?
I would say I went to college and I graduated with a degree in international relations. So really nothing to do with internet marketing. That being said, when I was in college, I studied abroad for a year in Spain, and I worked at the Hotel Ritz for a year because I was interested in hospitality. So my ambition was to become a general manager of a 5-star property. I had worked in hotels during high school. The moment I could work, we worked in my family. So the moment I could legally work and I had a permit, I started working at a hotel and continued working in that hotel during the summers when I was in college. And I learned all sort of aspects of the hotel business. I would, work in the health club, selling gym memberships, cleaning all the machines. And then I would go over to the restaurant I'd open it at 5 a.m., work till 2 p.m. Then at 3 p.m., I'd start my restaurant shift till 9 p.m. So I had like 2 jobs. And so I learned, I think, most, to answer your question, I would say college was a fun experience. I played soccer in college for a couple of years and then got injured, so stopped playing. But I don't know, in terms of learning, what I would say I learned that applied to the job. What I really learned, or where I most learned, I think, was through the jobs I had working, and then the internship I had, which was like a working internship. And then college was maybe the discipline, because I went to that 8 a.m. class and I had to study and prepare. And yes, I met friends, and maybe those relationships were beneficial for me. But I would say the most learning for me came through a lot of the work that I did during, with jobs that I had throughout high school and college, more so than I would say my college experience.
Yeah, 100%. That's kind of what I expected. I remember not too long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, there were a number of books that I saved from college because I thought, 20 plus years ago, this is going to be relevant one day. I'm going to need to look back through my books, to be able to do my work. And I remember pulling out my marketing book from college, late 90s, and we have no internet. I mean, just barely internet. We have no social media. We have none of this stuff. And I just kind of laughed as I looked through that because now we've had some people on here. We have one guest on the podcast, and he started at like 12 or 13 years old doing marketing, and he was creating he found a product to create, kind of pitched it on Instagram when Instagram was just getting started, didn't even know what it was. And it's like just the paradigm shift that's happened with what we can do now with digital technologies and social media and all these different aspects. And so like how people, we're around the same age, the three of us, what we were growing up in, I mean, was really kind of the most important part that I took away was building those relationships, was understanding like social awareness, social etiquette, and, taking initiative and all those things. I mean, you have like the core principles of marketing, like the 4 Ps and all the foundations, and stuff like that. But it's like, I've learned human psychology and human behavior is like one of the top things you can do with your business. Because if you understand how people are wired and you can speak to those pain points, you can speak to the emotions and evoke that out of somebody, then you're going to get them to move forward with you. It doesn't matter of all this other stuff that we've learned. And all mine came from like sitting under, some of the best people, and even going online, watching YouTube and learning just from some of the people out there, not the ones that are sitting in front of their Ferraris and sitting in front of their big, $1 million mansions. I think that gives marketing such a bad rap, but it's truly sitting under those people and just listening.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of those skills that you're referring to are just essential for being in business, whether you're an employee or you're a business owner. I used to make having a bachelor's degree a requirement to apply for a job at my agency, but I stopped making it a requirement years ago. I'm less concerned with your degree. We're not in medicine, we're not in law, right? So I think I'm less concerned with your degree and more interested in hearing about what where you spend your time and what skills you've sort of focused on, right? So if instead of 4 years of college, you sit down and we have a conversation and you tell me all of the things you did, but you didn't go to college that impressed me, I'm like, great. I could care less if you have a degree. Wow, you did 2 years of this, 2 years of that, and you learned how, you had hard skills learning and soft skills learning and all of these things that will be useful in a role at my company. That's great. So I even don't know with my kids, fast forward, 10, 15 years, who knows if they'll go to college.
Yeah.
I always think to myself, if I had them working for my company for 4 years and their friends starting in college as a freshman, 4 years later, my kids would be way more valuable than that kid that went to college for 4 years. That I can tell you with 100% certainty. If I put them to work at my agency for 4 years and someone enrolled at Boston University where I went for 4 years, my kid would be worth way more to an employer with 4 years of actual experience, practical experience working, because all those skills are transferable right away and
Yeah.
they've learned so much. In college, you're not really learning things that I can put to use right away in marketing, right? Because I still have to teach you, the Google and Meta and the platforms. I still have to, work with you on a lot of these things that you're not necessarily going to focus on in college unless you're very, very specific,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And my daughter's 9, and I'm trying to bring her into my business, into my work on a daily basis, with meetings and getting her to see how I interact with people, getting her confident with people, shaking people's hands, eye contact, like just things like that. I mean, I think those are good manners we should teach our children regardless, but how they do carry over into business. And then my daily work, it could be something as simple as if I'm in Photoshop or I'm doing video editing or I'm, building a strategy, inviting her in, teaching these things, because kind of what you just said, when the time comes, high school graduation, if she wants to go to college, I support that. If she doesn't want to go to college, I support that. And it was kind of, not that it was forced upon me, but it was just, this is the next step. After high school, you go here. At the time, I wanted to be an architect or like a civil engineer, and, sound a little different than you, Borja. At 18, you were going to class at 8 a.m. I was not ready for class at 8 a.m. at that time. So I realized that engineering and architecture were not for me at that point. But, we're all different there. One other question I had before we kind of go into present day, what you're doing, with the Ritz-Carlton, working there. I mean, Ritz-Carlton is kind of, creme de la creme. I mean, it's a lot different than other hotels and establishments out there. I can't remember if the book is called The Ritz-Carlton Experience, but that's one that I read, and I've had numerous events at the Ritz. They teach some fantastic principles to their staff, to where you feel so special if you're a guest when you come in. So can you comment on any takeaways from working in the Ritz or hospitality that have transpired into running your agency?
Yeah, I mean, the hospitality industry is a very demanding industry, and I learned a lot. I mean, so when I was working in a hotel during high school and college, it was a Radisson hotel. So a different category hotel, but I still learned a lot. I mean, the principles are the same, right? And maybe the levels of service vary, but in general, the principles are the same when it's hospitality, right? You're there to serve the customer, provide good customer service. All of those things are consistent. I think with the Ritz, when I was part of that sort of invitation-only program, you had to apply, so not anybody could be part of this program, and they picked only a select number of students, and I was the only student from the United States. Everybody else was from other parts of Europe. So I was also working for a hospitality brand or chain that was not domestic. So in every country, service is a little different. You go to Asia and you stay at a hotel, it's different than Europe, than the US, than South America. So every hotel brand sort of also within that culture is a little different in how they operate. But what I can say is it was a very, very good experience. I was part of a program where you were rotating through all the different parts of the hotel. So I started in housekeeping, and my job in housekeeping was to review every room before they turned it over to the guests. So after housekeeping was done, I would go in and I would look at everything. I'd pick up the drain, thing and make sure there wasn't a hair. I would look under the bed. I'd had a checklist of things that I was looking to just make sure that the room was absolutely perfect. So I did that, and I did, food and beverage. I did front office. I did VIP guest relations, where I was walking people up to their rooms. A lot of people in Hollywood would come. I met a lot of stars, Brad Pitt and Pierce Brosnan, and all these people that I would literally just escort to their room and tell them about the services that the hotel offered, and then they would be very generous and give me big tips. So I think it was just the standard of excellence. The general manager of that hotel was a very intimidating individual. He had been in the hospitality industry for many years. He had worked at that hotel for many years, and he really accepted nothing but the best from the staff, and it was ingrained in that culture, where when he would show up in the morning, he was first to get there and last to leave. And he knew all aspects of the job. So you knew around him, you had to be in your A game. And he would actually come to me when there was like a guest there from the US, and he would ask me questions in front of the guest. He would introduce themselves, and, and so I had to know everything about what I was doing. So I think the lesson learned for me was just in, being very focused on the details.
Yeah.
Sweat the small stuff. Oftentimes people say, don't sweat the small stuff. I think in this environment, it was pay attention to the details, because the details are what make the difference for the guests that we service. And you have to be very focused on that.
That's so good.
Absolutely.
There was one time I was staying at the Ritz in Pasadena. Now it's, I think, become the Langham Huntington. And I remember, the property was very large. And so trying to follow the maps to get to my room, and I'm out and I'm like, where in the world is my room? And there was an employee that was tending to like the cactus, or the plants, something like that, just bent over. And I didn't even know if he spoke English. And I said, excuse me, sir, could you help me, find my room number? He looks up, And he stopped what he was doing. He was like, follow me. And he walked me down this way, walked me down this way, walked me down this way, as opposed to like pointing, go down that way, take a left, your third room on the right. And it's like what you're talking about, the attention to detail that he did, like they went up so far in my books just by doing that. And, it starts from the top. The general manager you're talking about, I mean, he lived it. It's like as a parent, our kids aren't going to really listen to what we say, but they're going to do what we do or what they see us do. And this was just, one of those examples, like there's a reason, you pay more for certain products. There's a reason you pay more for different services. And it's all about that customer experience. And we talk often, with people who, you want to fall in that commodity bucket and just lower your price. That's a perfect way to end your business, and just get to the bottom of the barrel. But if you truly focus on that customer experience and truly focus on, delighting your customer, sky's the limit with your business.
Yep. It's so true. It's about the experience. And I'm a hotel snob myself and restaurant snob. And, I was recently traveling with my family. We stayed at it was the Ritz in this case. And I commented at the end, I always like to call out the good, right? I think oftentimes people focus on the bad. So if I ever have one bad thing, I need to provide 3 good things.
Compliment
I have a
sandwich.
I have a rule where I'm just like, it can't just be complaints. It has to be, by the way, these were some great things about our trip. And here's, and so I ended up sending a follow-up email to the manager of the property and I called out a few things. And one of those things was just as simple as, and the only other place I've seen this was at the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong, the original Mandarin Oriental, that brand is also very, very high end in hotels. And I just love how they just every morning they would wrap the cell phone cord. Like they would wrap, the cell phone and the chargers, all the chargers, it would be wrapped really nice. And they had the Ritz-Carlton little elastic that they wrap around it. So it was like really nice. And just a little details, right? Because I think, when you've traveled a lot and in life in general, it's the little things. It's not the big things anymore. It's just the little things that you really appreciate. So I think it's that, and you have to come up with differentiators too, right? Because we're in a commoditized space. There's many options when traveling. So how do you make that experience unique and memorable for that guest, for that client? What are things you can do that maybe your competitors are not doing, right? Because a lot of what you do is going to be the same. A lot of what you say is going to be the same. So how do you create a unique selling point or a unique value proposition or something that differentiates you in what is a very sort of competitive space? And I think that's what they look for as well.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the coffee stain theory?
No.
So coffee stain theory is like, let's say you're flying on an airline and, you got an awesome airline, your experience, you go check your bag and you had a very pleasant experience with the attendant up front. Getting through, just all processes are awesome. You get on the plane, walking down the tarmac, it's air conditioned. It's like, this is great. This is a great experience. Hop on the plane, the pilots are there to greet you. You see them, you're okay, I feel safe here. Pilots are awesome. Flight attendants take you to your seat, get them, like the whole thing, putting your baggage up top is just as spacious, you're not cramming it up there. So you're like, this is awesome. And you sit down and you lower the tray table. There's a big coffee stain right there. And it goes into how your experience with that brand right then, because of that coffee stain, is now, it tanked just because of that one little detail. And it just focuses on coffee stain theory, it focuses on how you have to pay attention to every detail. All those other elements were important, but it's going to affect, the brand perception if you neglect and miss out on these other pieces. So it just goes back to, again, with the Ritz or with anybody that focuses on excellence. I think it was Aristotle who said, excellence is not an act, but a habit. And it's doing it over and over and over and over again. And to where I see so many organizations that they just don't have systems and processes, where, let's say we're onboarding a new client and we're just kind of shooting from the hip, and people were like, oh, okay. And as opposed to really getting it dialed in to where you could take that process, hand it off to a new hire, like you said, somebody that doesn't have to go to college, but what they're good at, and they can make that new client just feel like they are the only client that you have. And so it's all about those details and it's all about excellence.
Yes. perfection, as long as perfectionism doesn't flow into procrastination and become its own bottleneck, right? I think we've all dealt with that at some point. You've got to find some kind of balance at whatever position you're in, right? I heard someone say not too long ago they'd rather post 20 posts on Instagram with a spelling error versus one good post that didn't have a spelling error, right? It's a mindset. And Netscape, man, going back to 1998, we only had like 3. I'm sitting there thinking, like, what browsers were in 1998? Like,
Lycos. You remember Lycos?
Yeah,
Bro.
they were a Massachusetts-based company.
Well,
That company, Lycos, yeah.
what was Apple? iCab? Something? Anyway, very few, bro.
Yeah, Netscape, I
And
remember that one.
look, we got to go back to the societal norm of pushing our kids through this system from high school straight to college, because I have a son who's 18. So he is on the verge of, and he's feeling the weight. He's constantly like, Dad, I'm stressed out. Oh, Dad, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh. Like, he's getting barraged from every which direction. And I think I just keep telling them the same thing. Just be patient. Just be patient. Take your time. Like, don't rush, right? Because it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to go to college and do this, right? Oh, I want to go into debt to do this. And now it's a business, right? They come out and they come interview with us and they show us their certificate and they want $1 gazillion. And you're like, gosh, guys, you've been brainwashed, right? It's like, so my biggest thing with him is just be patient. Like, take your time. I don't care if you take off a year, if you go to community college, try a few different things, get into service, learn an actual service that people actually need, right? But the stress that everyone is hitting him with simultaneously as a senior to take that next step into college is truly remarkable. I'm just amazed. I don't recall having that stress, maybe because I barely graduated. I barely went to enough classes to graduate high school. I went to art class almost all the time because it was like mid-afternoon my senior year. But the rest of the classes, I had to stay like after school for like 2 months straight to make up. Anyway.
Well, I think you found what you were passionate about. You know, that goes into kind of what we're talking about. Borja's talking about he doesn't need somebody with a college degree or a 4.0 from college or this or that. You can sit with somebody and BS meter is real. You can know pretty quickly what are you good about, what are you good at, and what are you passionate about. That's who I want working for me. I can train you on anything. I can teach you anything. But there are these things that, you know, how a person is with other people. You know, Jason, there's certain people you want client facing, right? That deal with a client. There's certain people you would not put client facing. And that's not a dish to the person you wouldn't put client facing. It's just they're good in this lane and this person is good in this lane. So make sure the right people are on the right seat in the bus. And you went into design, Jason. So there's a reason that art was a class that you went to, because it actually did something inside of you. You're like, I love this. I enjoy this. And that's why you pursued, in my opinion, what you're doing now. You've been doing it for 2 decades.
But it took me a while. Like, that was in high school, right? And then I took a lot of extracurricular activities and did a lot of other things until I finally took a Photoshop class in like my 4th year of community college. I was taking like 2 classes at a time and working and making money and just living life, right? And it was a Photoshop class above the art room. They had 4 Macs. Remember the old Macs, the colored ones, the big, huge ones? And it was a Photoshop class. And that's what really flipped the trigger from traditional art to digital, was that first Photoshop class. And that stuck with me. It took me another 2-3 years before I even pursued any of the digital arts. And it was just a total, like, you look back at like, man, I wish I would have did this different. But you connect all the dots. Like, wow, if I wouldn't have dated that crazy ex-girlfriend that talked me into going to Charlotte and just on a whim picking a degree that I had to work at night and go during the day just to pay for, was graphic design, right? It just totally lined up, and maybe I should have rushed. I don't know. But my biggest thing with him is I'm like, just don't rush. Just look, don't feel the pressure, right? Work with me. We'll find you something else. We'll explore together, because I truly don't, they don't know. They don't know at that age what they want to do unless they're in like sports, right? And maybe that
Yeah.
makes some sense, right?
Well, I think sometimes that pressure comes, if I recall, when I was interviewing or applying for colleges, I think sometimes that pressure comes from his peer set, right?
Yeah.
Like they're getting into college, and maybe I should go, or I didn't get into college. So it's not so much that you are pressuring him as much as maybe, the conversations at school,
It's
right?
all
So
external.
when you said that, it made me understand probably where the stress point is for him. But I love how you said two things: patience, number one. But I like that he's going through this stress, because I think he needs to start learning what stress is and
Absolutely.
learning how to deal with it, as we've talked about here. But patience, I mean, that's like the biggest piece of advice I give people out of college when they're working for that first job is patience. And that's one thing I see very little of these days.
Yeah.
I see very little patience. I see a lot of YouTube shorts, instant gratification, called my Uber. It's not here. Everything is like, I want it now, right? And that's a combination of social media influence and like it just people's expectations are out of whack. Like I always tell my team, when the going gets tough, don't pull the ripcord. See it through. Like just because things become difficult doesn't mean you need to quit, right? Doesn't mean you need to look for the exit door. It means see it through. Like during those 8 years of working for that startup, we had an IPO a year after I joined, and it was champagne and stock and millionaires and a lot of excitement. And then we went through the dot bomb, right? And that was really low times. I had never been exposed to layoffs. That was a chilling thing when I went into a company in my early 20s, and my friend who I was like, "Where is this person?" "Oh, they got let go." I'm like, "They got let go? Like they didn't even know they were going to let go?" "Yeah, that's what happens. They just
Man.
tell you that
Yeah.
day." And I didn't ever have exposure to that, and that was like a big deal for me. I was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa," you know? So like my point is patience is king, and you have to have a long game mentality, and you
Long
have to
game.
see
Yep.
things through, because anybody that is just looking for grass is greener mentality is going to be disappointed. Like, you know, like get comfortable with the uncomfortable. If something at work is difficult for you, it doesn't mean it's not the right fit, or it doesn't mean it's a bad company. It's could be very normal, and you're gonna see it at the next company, right? But kinda get through it and see what happens when the dust settles and see how you feel. You might have grown a lot going through that experience and seeing it through. And then sometimes what I found working for companies where people were leaving, some people took that and said, "Oh, this must not be a good company." Me, I said, "This is not about them. This is about me. What is my experience at this company? This is my journey." And selfishly, I don't care what other people do. Unless they're paying my bills, I don't care, right? So I said, now the people left, that created opportunity for me. I stayed, I got that opportunity. I made more money, I got more responsibility. So sometimes, like, I think people make those decisions because they lack patience, to what Jason was saying and advising his son is be patient. You don't have to have it all figured out. That's kind of, yeah.
So
As you're
Borja,
sharing,
how does that go over with your clients when you've got to explain, be patient, it's the long game,
Yeah.
while you
So,
dial in
yeah.
your,
Yeah.
your performance marketing
And
background?
that all happens early to me, the sales process is setting up expectations to make sure that there's alignment between me and my client. So if you're my client and you say, Borja, my expectation is that this thing is driving record results in 2 weeks. I may say to you, hey, Jason, we may be misaligned because you think we're going to do something that is not going to happen in 2 weeks. And I need you to commit to like 8 weeks. Like I need you to have a vision of this is going to be a lot of experimentation and it's not going to be an instant success, right? So it's really education because someone that has been doing this for 26 years and has worked with a lot of companies should be able to come in and say, hey, this is not a you turn the on button and sales start coming in. There's a lot of things we have to do before we get to a point where you're going to be very happy with the sales you're seeing. And sometimes it's an easy conversation and sometimes it's not.
Do you think they've been exposed so much to the instant gratification, like business owners, C-suite, entrepreneurs, just like we're talking about with our kids, right? Instant gratification. Do you think that's how it's kind of manifested in the business world? Everybody wants everything yesterday. And
I think with business owners, it is usually they understand because, I mean, I'm talking about real business owners, not entrepreneurs or people that think they have a business that don't have a business. Generally speaking, most people that have a real business have gone through, they understand that this is a bit of a long game. Now, the question becomes is, are they willing to accept how long this takes? Right? They're not expecting results tomorrow, and it varies. Some have more patience than others. But what I find is some are not willing to commit the amount of patience needed to make a program successful. Therefore, it ends up not working out, right? More often than not, I don't see business owners typically with the mentality of instant gratification. I think the businesses that we work with, they pretty much know nothing comes without work. That being said, at times it requires a little bit of education and pushback to say, hey guys, you want to work with me and you want to do things on a month-to-month basis. I don't operate that way. I'm going to commit to you for at least 5 months, and I need you to commit to me to 5 months so that we're going to see this through. Otherwise, we're just like making knee-jerky decisions that aren't substantiated by data, right?
And I think you're being generous. Like 5 months, that's not a whole lot of time, right, Borja? In the grand scheme of things, like you got companies with like 5-year, 10-year visions, right? And
I think a lot of people have been burned, in the past in business, and I can't tell you how many businesses we've talked to, and they bring up, well, that's exactly what this other agency said. Or these people said we need 12 months of SEO and you're going to see results. And we spent $60,000, $100,000, and we didn't see results. And that's like one of the number one objections that I get. And, in marketing, it's always going to be our fault as an agency. It is always going to be our fault. It's never anything that they did. And that's just a rule of thumb. Something I've learned.
Even though that might not be 100% accurate.
I was going to say yeah.
And I'm saying, true. I'm not claiming that, but I'm just saying this is what we hear. That hey, it's your fault. I did everything I was supposed to do.
And I have a good case, like here I had an example. We had a customer fly in from out of the country. They're not based in the US, and we had an in-person meeting last Friday. And it was great, obviously, face to face. Nothing beats it. But then the founder of that company said to me, hey, we want to add another $100,000 a month in spend. I won't name the client for obvious reasons. And he said, but I don't want it to be tied to how much we pay you. I only want to pay you if it performs. Like if we hit a certain efficiency. And I pushed back. I said, no, because that's not our model. And we don't control everything.
Right.
Like we don't control inventory availability, how long it takes to ship your product, what the price is relative to your competition. Is your website moving quickly? how's customer service? Like, these are all variables that I do not
Yeah.
control. Therefore, I do not want to be penalized should this not perform because of those reasons. And I just said, it's not our model. I'm going to have to commit this much in labor no matter what, and I need to be paid. And he didn't understand that. But again, this is where I, as a business owner, had to push back respectfully and say, that's just not our model. Like, we have to be compensated no matter what the results are. What I will commit to you is we will continue to do a really good job and we will be responsibly managing that additional spend. But I can't be held accountable to hitting a certain, you know, margin for you because I just don't control all of this process.
Such a
Good
good
for you,
answer.
man.
That
Yeah,
was
I was
such
gonna
a good
say
answer.
that's
That was
that's
solid.
perfect. Because how many clients have we all taken on that we should not have? You know, early on in my career,
Oh
I took
gosh.
on because it's like, hey, I need likes this month. I need food this month. You take on any business you could get as you're growing the business. It leads me into a quote, Borja from our pre-call, I'm gonna get to. But it's like once you start understanding those elements, and like I think it's one of the most freeing things to be able to say no to somebody. And it's interesting when you say no to somebody, how often we don't like to be told no. And those people will really press to want to do business with you because, well, don't say no. But as an organization, you have values. You know, the way that you handled that show the core values of your organization, which is important both internally for people that come on board and work with you to where, all right, this is what our company stands for, as well as externally to where you're setting those expectations up front. We don't work this way. I personally, I love kind of the rev share opportunity in some of these things to where if you perform, we split the commission, but it's like you said, it's based on these variables, that come into play. Those aren't here. This is very black and white, something we manage. And then we know we do a good job with paid ads or we do a good job with SEO. I can guarantee my work. And so, but that's a different story. But Borja, in our pre-call, I wrote it down here. You had mentioned that being a CEO or a founder isn't glamorous, which I found interesting as you're talking. I mean, it's just reminded me of that. I mean, could you elaborate a little bit on the realities of business ownership, like that people don't understand?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are following social media influencers or people that are founders or CEOs. And you said it earlier, they're wearing a very expensive watch or sitting next to one of their expensive cars or villas or whatever it is. And so they instantly think, wow, this is an incredible life, right? You started a company, you're making all this money, you've acquired all these material assets. What is there not to like? And by the way, some of those people have actually achieved immense success. So there's like 90% that don't have what they put out. And then there's like a 10% that actually do, right? There's plenty of successful people out there. But I think what people forget is the path it took to get there. So now I'm 28 years in my career. Uh, I've had some success along the way. And I'm at a point now where someone might observe me and say, wow, it must be great to be, a CEO or founder. But I think what they forget is like all of the work I put in to get to this point, right? And it's not always very glamorous when you're running a company. In fact, the job description reads, like you have to do everything, right? Like the good stuff, the bad stuff. Like there's a lot of things during the course of business, whether a client hasn't paid you or who you thought was a loyal employee that you overpaid and gave them everything they asked for still leaves. There's just so many things that come up during the course of business that are not very fun. But if you are focused on the mission and you like what you're doing, it doesn't really get to you. You're just like, hey, this is all meant. It's par for the course, right? Like I'm supposed to deal with clients leaving me, even though I conceded on price and I'm driving year over year record results. Yes, that has happened. I've had a client tell me, you guys have helped us year over year grow more than anybody ever has, but we still want to try something else. I'm like, that statement doesn't even make sense to me, unless I'm just not understanding that. But we still have to try someone else. I'm like, okay, does that work in a personal relationship where you're married and your wife says, I love you, I love you, I love our kids, but let me just try someone else? Like, it just doesn't, like, I don't understand, right? So it's like you deal with all this stuff, right? It's not
Yeah.
always fun, But again, where you get a lot of the gratification and where you get a lot of the fulfillment is by hiring people that end up, becoming so much better than when they started, right? At media buying or at design or whatever the role is. We've hired so many people over the last 7 years who started very junior and were with us for 3 or 4 years and then went on to start a small consultancy or went off to work at another company at a bigger position. And I'm so happy, right? I've done a good job if they left worth more than they came in, right? And it's always me saying, "Congratulations. I hate to lose you and I'd love for you to stay, but I know like you're not going to retire here, so I wish you the best," right? And am I bummed out you're leaving? Of course, right? But I still respect the fact that there's other opportunities out there and you have to do that, right? So like for me, as long as, these wins along the way are happening with employees or customers, then all the BS that I have to deal with is so much easier because you're only doing this because you're getting some wins, right? Otherwise, if everything's an L, then why are you in business? You gotta have that to look forward to.
It's always perception, right? I always perceived it. It's kind of like, when you go to your kids and they're graduating middle school or elementary or even high school now, which I'm about to experience. You look at it and you're like, wow, you gave them that opportunity to grow, right? And you pour into them. You try to, nurture their experience and their growth. And like you said, after me, I'm 25 plus years, you're 28 years. It's been a lot of people, right? A revolving door. At some point, at first, it's stressful. But once again, we're talking about stress. You learn how to manage the stress, right? And your mindset shifts. And that's when I really feel that you can experience a lot of growth, right? As you keep going in your career. Borja, and right now, the churn rate is at an all-time high in our industry. All-time high.
Yes.
There's zero brand loyalty. They want to, hey, let me sign on for 3 months. Let me, let's make this happen in a month, and then we'll see. Let's do this. It's all caveat driven, right? And I think Jay Hill mentioned it earlier. There's been so many burns, right? Because our industry is so diluted, right? You got everybody coming from emails for, I'll get you on the first page for $2.99 to, a company doing it for $25,000, right? And we were just talking with a client. And they got back proposals. I think they're talking to maybe a dozen agencies or whatnot. And the guy said, I can't believe at how much the cost difference was, how low some costs were and how high. And he automatically was like, I'm chopping out the low ones, right? Because he knows he's experienced. This company's
Smart buyer.
right?
Yeah, right.
But once again, our market has been so diluted, so saturated. It's just so much pain, right? It's been given. When is the last time we've met with a client, Jonathan, that's had a good experience? I don't know. 25 years. I don't think I've ever came into a place, unless it's a startup, like they're brand new with no experience. That's it, right?
Well, I don't think they'd be talking to us if they've been having a good experience with another agency that's helping them.
Well, wait, maybe because they did that to us. Like we remember what I said?
Yeah,
Achieve
that's true.
results, but I guess they were talking to someone else while we were doing record
All right,
results.
good point.
They
Good
were
point.
kind of,
Well,
on the
and the
side.
reason is what I've learned, and this is what I've learned is, it sounds negative, and I'm an optimist and half glass full guy. Trust me, I always find the good, but people, what they tell you is not true. Like oftentimes, like unfortunately, not everybody is as direct and honest and transparent. Like I have always believed in building relationships, whether it's good or bad news, like just based on very open and transparent communication. I've had employees, and this is real business owner talk. I mean, I have numerous examples of meeting with employees not to say that we have a revolving door here, but we've had our a share of attrition just because it is what it is, right? Where they have said, and we've met with them frequently and have a pulse on their happiness here. How are you doing? Is there more we can provide? If you could ask for one thing, what would that be? We give them, right? Whether
Yes.
it's money, a benefit, or whatever. And they say, no, I'm happy. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, "Oh, I'm giving my notice." I'm like, "We just talked about this and we've been in communication and we have a pulse on workload balance and you're only working 39 hours, which makes us happy because we don't want you to burn out and we gave you this and that." So like, what happened? Well, I just wanted to try something new. And I'm like, "Well, but you're going into digital marketing. That's not something new. If you had said you wanted to be like a dermatologist or a dentist, I would understand. But if you're staying on the same track, like there's always this disconnect." So what I've learned with clients and employees is do the best you can, give them very few reasons to fire you or quit. And then the rest is not inside your control, right? Because people are going to do whatever they want, and not everybody is going to be forthcoming, which I always was. I always said to my manager, before I start interviewing, I want to see if I can work this out. Can you pay me more? Can I change job descriptions? Can I move into this group? Give you a chance because I'm loyal and I always want to give someone the opportunity to make things right or make this a better place for me, or at least have that conversation before I start thinking about the alternative. And I always ask my team, guys, if I can make one request, it's just before you start looking for something else, sit down with me and tell me you're not happy or what you're not happy about or what you need. And if I can't do it, then do what you need to do, but give me an opportunity to try to retain you and put you in a position where you're prospering.
Mm. I
Boom.
had someone told me years back, dude, it was like 20 years ago, and I don't even remember who it was, but it's been such a powerful, uh, just what they said to me, it left such an impression. He was like, whatever you think you're going to make, he said, go ahead and take off 25% in your forecast or whatever. He said, because you're going to lose clients for various reasons, right? And then he said, whoever that you got, working with you or whatnot, or whatever your team is, do the same with your team because they're going to leave for various reasons. And that was 20 years ago. And when he first told me before that, I was like, we're going to keep everybody. Like, there's no reason for nobody to leave us. Like, I don't want to see one client leave. Like, when we would lose a client, I would break down like every detail and it would haunt me for like months. Right. And I would just be like, why? Like, everything was right. Why?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but I had it forecasted. Right. And then I was counting on that, and like banging my head against the table. And he told me that it was an old guy. Gosh, I wish I knew who it was so I
He
could
had
actually
gray
give
hair,
him
didn't he?
credit. He had gray. And now he said 25%. I bumped it up to 30% with inflation, right? Let's just be real. Because
Yeah.
hey, now you never know. It's like you said, y'all were killing it. And then unfortunately, we had we worked with a company and the owner passed, unfortunately, right? And in one company, there was there was a divorce situation, right? And then maybe this happens and maybe this happens. There's all these things that you don't have control over. But he told me that, and without a doubt, I never count on that 30%. Always act like, how do we operate at a 30% efficiency, right? And it's always been pretty accurate, right? Now, in some cases, it's been better, which I'm pleased about, but it's just reality, right? And then passing that on even to other companies, the companies that you do business with as well, with their expectations. They need to have that same mindset when it comes to marketing. Not everything is going to hit, right? You don't control every attribute, every detail, every competitor, right? How the algorithms are shifting, how Google suddenly is dumping a ton of their spend in their AI development, right? Boy, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's like, and they could be rolling flat. They haven't increased their budget due to inflation. They hit what I call the invisible bar, where they're essentially plateaued. But if they hadn't did anything, they would be like, bad, like down. And it's still a win. And it could be due to budgetary restrictions, right? So all we could do is educate on the trends, on the cost of doing business, and best practices, right? And the whole
So
promise thing, yeah, it just
Yeah.
drives, it makes me crazy, man.
as we wrap up today, Borja, thanks for your time. I just have one question. You answer real quickly. Like, obviously, there's a lot of challenges of running a business. So, what keeps you motivated through running a business?
I think for me, it's I love the team we've assembled. Like working with the team every day to service our clients and developing them, right? Helping a lot of these guys become better at the craft of what is paid media, and not just the hard skills side, but the soft skills side of the business too. That's what kind of motivates me. Is the mission we're on is to develop a good team, but also work with great companies and help them achieve success. And through all of that, I mean, that's just a statement, but it's all the work that goes into doing it that keeps me motivated because I like it, right? And it's hard. Like it's not easy, right? Because you're dealing with people, right? And we talked about this earlier, but anytime you're dealing with people, there's the psychological aspect of it, right? And also, just not every day is a great day, right? Some people hate Mondays, right? I used to not love Mondays when I was an employee. Now as a founder, I love Mondays, right? So I think it's like just the satisfaction for me comes from the team, working with the team, seeing them get better, seeing our clients get better. A lot of those interactions are are what I look forward to when sort of coming into work. And also the opportunity. Like we're in a business where there's so much opportunity, right? It's really all upon us in terms of how much opportunity we want to realize and how much we're willing to go after that opportunity. But like online advertising, even with artificial intelligence coming into to the picture, it's just so abundant in terms of opportunity, right? With all the different platforms that exist, right? You got TikTok, you got LinkedIn, you have Meta, you have Google. I mean, those are some big ad platforms, and so a lot of our clients are leveraging those ad platforms to scale, and they're doing it with efficiency. So that's like a good signal for me in terms of the business we're in.
I love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. So I know we just kind of started today's episode. We just kind of rolled straight in, went into stresses. I don't even know if we fully introduced you, Borja, when we were chatting, but tell people in your quick elevator speech exactly what you offer through your agency, and then how people can get connected with you, follow you on your website, social media, or whatever you want to share.
Yeah, so I co-founded a digital marketing agency. We have 3 offices, 2 in California, 1 in Mexico. And what we do is very simple to explain, but difficult to execute. So we help businesses scale through digital advertising. Specifically, we're buying media on the different ad platforms out there: Google, Meta, LinkedIn, Bing, TikTok. So we're taking the money that they have and managing it across those channels to help them acquire customers. And in addition to media buying, we also do a lot of creative design to support the social marketing media campaigns that we're running for our clients. And then we help them with a lot of the reporting and tracking aspects of campaign management.
Awesome. So how can people find you?
They can visit us by going to our website, four15digital.com, 415digital.com. There you can learn more about the services that we offer. We have some client success stories, a little bit more about our culture and what it's like to work for 415. And then we have a lead form. You fill that out, we'll be back in touch. And for anybody who's listening, who's a business owner and wants someone to come in and do an audit, a pretty comprehensive audit of their digital marketing programs, we're happy to do that free of charge. We love looking at different businesses and learning more. So yeah, feel free to do that.
Awesome.
4:15.
Awesome. There you have it, guys. Borja, thanks so much for taking the time, sit with us, chat with us, laugh with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you tuning in to Love Your Brand Podcast. Until next time, peace.
Peace.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the Love Your Brand Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, share the love.